Dr. Woods, let me ask you first. I read the text before we go through it. Could we be a matter of weeks or months before these two witnesses appear? Where do they appear in the tribulation period?
Well, I would say we could be within weeks or months. I don't know that for sure, but it's completely possible. And it does mention there 42 months. I put that at the synonym, by the way, for 1,260 days, 3.5 years. I believe it's the first half. And tribulation period is 7 years. It's what happens in the middle is the temple is desecrated, but you've got two 3.5 year increments. Daniel chapter 9, verse 27 indicates that. I'm of the persuasion that we're dealing with the first half of the tribulation because you're dealing with the beast. The beast comes up out of the earth and kills the two witnesses. I think this is the first reference to the beast or the Antichrist in the whole book of Revelation. And so it kind of looks to me like it's takes place during a time period when the beast or the Antichrist has greater authority. As you kind of move progressively into the tribulation period, his power seems to diminish. It seems like it's greatest right at the beginning. So for that reason, and maybe a few other reasons, I put this towards the beginning, at least in the first half of the tribulation period. But it's just a fascinating prophecy. It wraps up a lot of loose ends in terms of the identity of the two witnesses. And it really, modern technology, as you mentioned before, is really setting the stage, for the fulfillment of this prophecy.
Hmm. So let's go through it. Who do you think the two witnesses are? I know theologians debate as to who they are. Who do you think they are?
Well, the traditional view throughout church history has been Enoch and Elijah. And I'm not a big fan of Enoch. I'm a fan of Enoch, of course, but not being a candidate for one of these two witnesses because Enoch was a Gentile. Enoch had his ministry in Genesis 5 before the nation of Israel was birthed in Genesis 12. So I think they're going to be two Jews because God's hand is back on Israel during this time period. So I think one of them will be Elijah, whose life was cut short. Remember, he was taken to heaven in a chariot, 1 Kings 17, verse 1. And then I think the other one will probably be Moses. Remember, Moses was not allowed to enter the promised land, and he was buried there on Mount Nebo, having only seen the promised land from a distance. And so, there's many reasons why I think it's Moses and Elijah, but not the least of which is their ministry or their calling card, as some have called it, is given away. One of them turns water to blood. That's exactly what Moses did in the Old Testament with the Nile. And another one shuts up the heavens for 3.5 years. That's what Elijah did, right down to the 3.5 years. James 5, verse 17, Luke 4, verse 25. And here we're dealing with a 3.5 year time period. So I'm thinking that he'll shut up the heavens for that 3.5 year time period. Malachi 4, verses 5 and 6 predicts that Elijah would make a guest appearance in the last days. Jude verse 9 talks about how Michael at one point was disputing with Satan concerning the body of Moses. Now, why would there be such a dispute? Well, maybe because Moses is going to need, his body again. And these two prophets, Moses and Elijah, Moses representing the law, Elijah representing the prophetic time period, they have a tendency to make guest appearances when the kingdom is near. You remember the two of them, Matthew 17, verse 1 and following, appeared with Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration, during a time period when the kingdom was being offered to national Israel 2,000 years ago. And so you kind of put all the data together, and I think you've got a pretty good case for Moses and Elijah.
So, how do you think they appear on the scene? Do they just all of a sudden one day pop up and start preaching? Do they come down out of the heavens? Do they make some kind of grand, glorious entrance? I mean, how do you think this begins?
Well, we're really not told. They just move into a place of prominence. Um, Modern technology, has set the stage for this. In fact,
By the way, I
as
just
I
have to kind of chuckle. I have to chuckle when you talk about modern day technology. So you think it's Moses and Elisha, right? You said.
I, I do, yeah.
Okay, so if that's the case, can you imagine Moses having a microphone stuck in his face by a podcaster trying to interview him? Do you think that friendly people that are friendly or curious, you think they'll be allowed to interview these guys? Well, in other words, do you think Moses will get will get his hand at taking on the liberal global media?
Well, he could, but the way it looks to me is they do their ministry, and I don't know if they're controlling the technology or not. I would assume they're not. But technology picks up what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And this is an article here I'm quoting from. This goes all the way back to 2017, which shows you that the infrastructure in Jerusalem, this infrastructure that I'm going to describe here, has been in place for a number of years. But it's an article from CNN, July 24th, 2017. The title of it is Israel Installs Cameras as Jerusalem Tensions Build. Just a couple of sentences. Israel has installed security cameras near the entrance of the holiest sites in Jerusalem as tensions between Israelis and Palestinians edge higher after a violent week. Israel installed security cameras near the entrance to the old city of Jerusalem holy site early Sunday morning, close quote. And I've been to Jerusalem many times, and you can't even walk down a street in Jerusalem without seeing a number of security cameras. And think of the Temple Mount area. Think of the high tension there, particularly now as this war has broken out. I've been there several times when they found a backpack that someone left behind, and they have literally evacuated the whole place, for fear of a bomb threat. And this infrastructure, this technology has been there for the whole world to see this ministry of these two witnesses exactly like the Bible anticipates. You mentioned in your monologue at the beginning that if you go back in time, Bible commentators have had a difficult time trying to make sense of this prophecy. Well, today we know exactly what it's talking about. It's talking about cameras and live feeds. In fact, you can go to websites right now and watch a live feed of what's taking place in Jerusalem and on the Temple Mount. So we don't really need any real imagination to see how this prophecy is going to be fulfilled. Give history enough time and it eventually catches up with the scenario the Bible anticipates for the end of the age.